Hello, dear friends. It's good to be back. Welcome to the Pearl Dialogues. My name is Wazi, and together I host this podcast with Elin. This is a student-led initiative hosted by the Youth Council of this school, the Diamond Approach School. And we have conversations with teachers in the Diamond Approach. For those of you who are new to this teaching, there are links in the description, the show notes, where you can learn more about it. There is also a glossary and other interesting resources. In my conversation today, I talk with Jessica Britt, who is one of the first teachers, the senior teachers of this school. And what we talk about is the teaching, the essence of the Diamond Approach teaching itself. And then eventually we expand into exploring intimate relationship. What is the actualized condition of an intimate relationship? We also talk about masturbation and how that connects to sexuality. We talk about what is a good student and a good teacher. And another interesting topic is that of plant medicine. So, yeah, it's a rich conversation. And I also want to announce that we have a new logo. The podcast has a new logo now. So you can check that out. As always, I invite you to sense your arms and legs, body and being while listening. And with that, I say thank you and enjoy.
What is the Diamond Approach, right?
Yeah, let's go into that.
Yes. So at this moment, I like the word portal.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the Diamond Approach? I'd say it is a portal into the mystery, into what is reality, but also what is the human? What is life? So it's one of the things I appreciate about the Diamond Approach. It's very down to earth.
Yeah.
Right. Like you had a question for me around shamanism. So I'll just as a brief side note, shamanism in a certain way also asks the question, what is reality? What is the cosmos? What is the human's relationship to the cosmos? It's very much at the heart of, and so their focus in some ways is what is the nature of a tree? Mm-hmm. And you have to go very deep into shamanism in a certain way to go from what is the nature of the tree to what is my nature.
Yeah. The
Diamond Approach, basically because of the way it unfolded, is really an orientation with certain kind of methodologies, certain kind of orientation that's really directed at what is reality through the discovery of what am I. I can remember years ago when I first started working with Hamid, and people who know me know this, I did not start working with Hamid as a spiritual teacher. So we're talking, I can't remember, 1974, 1975, a long time ago. And I started seeing him as a Reichian therapist. But after a couple of years of fairly traditional Reichian breath work, he started asking me questions, and I'd done a lot of psychotherapy and a lot of different things that nobody had ever asked me before. That shifted my attention from not just my emotional experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I can still remember the moment it happened. He asked me what I was feeling in my chest. And I think I said nothing. Now, any other therapy I'd done, Jungian, Freudian, Gestalt, would have gone on to a something. And he said, what's the nothing like? And I remember, and I'm young, but I remember sitting there going, what is nothing like? And I was lying down, the classic Reichian position. I kind of turned to him, I said, Hamid, nothing is nothing. It just makes me laugh now. And he goes, is it a light nothing or a dark nothing? Is it a light nothing or a dark nothing? So where he directed my attention, is it a light nothing or a dark nothing, opened up a whole other door, a whole other portal into the mystery of something, nothing, but also going from gross experience, very physical experience, even more subtle than emotional experience, to the realm of subtle or spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. And how he used to talk about it is, again, we'd never used the word spiritual in the early days. He'd say it's an adventure in consciousness. And we're, in a certain way, he's a scientist. People know this. He has a background in studying physics. And he said, and we're the test tube. Our location is the portal for investigating what is the nature of reality. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I profoundly appreciated about the diamond approach is that in exploring what is the nature of reality, no aspect of reality is excluded. No aspect of reality is excluded. This is so profound.
Yeah.
Right? Which means the body's not excluded. The history's not excluded. No emotion is excluded. No sensation is excluded. So it's a very, I'm starting to feel a certain kind of immediacy in this moment, in the non-exclusion of anything. Right? So everything's included, but also there's a particular way that there's a certain method that in the inclusion, based on what's needed in the moment, we're taught how to focus on a particular something of significance in that moment. Right?
Yeah. Which brings in the notion of guidance, right?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Say a little bit more what you're interested in and about guidance, because that's a huge subject.
So the first thing that came to me when it comes to guidance was intuition, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I traveled to, this is just right after I had this epiphany experience of, so one day I went out to nature and I had this, I'm going to just make it short. I went out to nature. This was pre having read anything spiritual, having known anything about philosophy. And I had this profound awakening experience where I was sitting outside under a tree, and I was experiencing a combination of confusion, anxiety, and curiosity. And in that pressure cooker of myself erupted or came in an insight that came along the lines of, or it was specifically this: I am what I am, but what am I? So that was the beginning of my journey and beginning of my path.
So I'm going to invite you to just slow down for a moment, because I'm touched when you said the key sentence.
Yeah. I am what I am, but what am I?
Yes.
Yeah, so innocent, so honest.
Yes.
Yeah. Just completely, I can just feel so much purity inside my soul when I connect with that.
Beautiful. Yes. That's what so as that, you see, that impulse, I also had a similar feeling, but when I was very young. And my experience working with people who have a flame have this inside them. I am what I am, but what am I?
Ah, yeah.
Right. And that's often camouflaged by all kinds of things. It's very beautiful that you felt it early and in such a clear way.
Hmm.
So the diamond approach, we have a particular orientation to open that question up that in the beginning excludes nothing about one's experience because it's your experience. It's my experience. I'm not going to find out who I am by going over there. I'm only going to find out by going here. And then, of course, what the here is so rich and so multifaceted. It's one reason there's so many spiritual paths, is there's so many entryways in to what's here. And the diamond approach, we have our particular way of supporting the unfoldment of what's here through a particular orientation that in certain ways is very Western, because it includes the historical self. It includes the sense of self that we enter the path on, that has our name and our birth date and a particular history and particular impressions. And we go, all those impressions, all those ways you think you are important. And we're going to start right there. And from inside out, we're going to find out. Another way I could say that each one of those impressions is a thread, is like a breadcrumb to the essential part of oneself. The way I like to say it, it's a kind of easy way, is like in the diamond approach, we really work with the emotions in a very unique way for a spiritual path. Right? We don't say, oh, particular emotions are unspiritual. All emotions, everything that's manifesting is part of reality. There's only one reality. So it's one reason we fundamentally don't reject anything, but we want to understand it and get to the inner nature of all the forms. So like with, say, anger, there are many traditions that have a kind of attitude towards anger. And we go, well, don't act it out. Don't do any harm with it to the best of your capacity. But let's discover, what is the anger about? It's not a mistake that you're feeling angry. It's coming from reality. What are the seeds of the anger? What are the beliefs around the anger? What's your history around the anger? Let's get to the truth of the anger. And, in our work, we have a certain kind of alchemy. And the truth of the anger, underneath it is, we get to something called the red essence, that there's an inner strength, right? That mostly when we're angry is when something doesn't either go our way or reflect our truth. Now, it might be a psychological truth. It might be a kind of narcissistic truth, whatever. But we don't, and we want to protest. No, right? So in a certain way, anger is a certain way for the soul says no. Now, some of the reasons the soul is saying no are very subjective and psychological and, not based on reality, not based on the purity of reality. They're based on one's subjective reality. But if you unwrap that, you can start feeling, oh, this is why I'm angry. And oh, I really wanted to stand up for myself. I wanted to set a boundary. I mean, there are all kinds of things around that gets to an essential purity is mainly the point I want to make. And the diamond approach has a way of finding the purity within all forms. Right.
And when you say diamond approach has a way of finding the purity of all forms, I am immediately brought to the actual stream or consciousness of the teaching itself somehow. That it has a directionality, and the directionality is truth, and there is an orientation towards reality. And like you said, there is a total inclusion of all of life, all of reality, nothing is excluded. And often when I contemplate myself, what is this teaching? I feel it that it has its own living organismic quality. And I guess the best reference I have for it, how I experience it in myself when in its aliveness, is as if it has a stream. It can stream through and also inform somehow my soul and inform the way I perceive. And what I'm curious about is also with the reality being based in and oriented towards reality, I'm reflecting on its relationship to true nature.
Okay. So feel it's that reflection. So I'm going to fully align with you around this sense of that dynamic stream.
Yeah.
Right. So reality is obviously beyond infinite. It's endless. The potential is unlimited. And this is only my way of talking about it. I claim no objectivity about this. But my sense of it is that if there's a beautiful saying that the absolute is the only subject. There's only one beingness. There's only one subject.
Yeah.
The subject is infinite.
Yeah.
Right. So coming from that view, my sense of things is that the one subject has many, many, many ways of expressing itself. Many. Now, we're so deep in the mystery right now. On one level, there's an evolution. There's an unfoldment through something we call time. On another level, it's all here right now. I'm just going to leave that there. So I'm just going to go into the evolution in time.
Yeah.
From a certain perspective, human forms are very, very new on the timeline. Planets. Now, there could be other life forms on other planets. I'm all in on that possibility, right? But within from the Earth view, the human form is very new form. So in a certain way, the original teachings, in a certain way, was like helping this arising form with a certain kind of intelligence, a certain kind of potential for heartfulness, which has been a developmental thing. Right? It's been a developmental thing. So original teachings, in a certain way, were trying to, in a certain way, keep us from killing each other. We're still having trouble with that, if you might notice, on the planet. Not so easy, right? And the original teaching said, oh, look at the nature of everything. is this fundamental beingness, goodness, mystery. And you have all the wonderful Eastern teachings. Mhm. What's my own sense of the place of the diamond approach? So in a certain way, you could say not only are humans evolving, spiritual teachings are evolving. The absolute reality is saying, okay, you got this about my nature. Did you even know this also? Right. And so my own sense, this is right, is that one of the gifts of the diamond approach, not the only gift, but one of the gifts is it's like reality is coming through, this stream of reality is coming through and say, not only are the trees and the sky and everything, and not only is your nature pure love or pure beingness or pure mystery or non-dual reality, pure awareness. This stream, this particularity that we are, this human, is also true nature. And true nature is learning to express itself personally. Person, one form of the absolute, another form of the absolute, talking to each other. Right? And there's something about, touches me, there's something about reality almost saying to our biological human form, not only are you an exquisite ground of true nature, you have this very special heart that's not just universal, it's personal. It can become a very dignified, personal, like true nature, loving personally, the absolute loving personally. Right? I mean, one of the things I think about the Christian traditions, right? Now, I confess I'm an old Catholic girl, right? But there's a power in the nativity. That was a whole new movement on the planet. The nativity, a woman, a man, and an infant. And this infant was considered divine. That was a very new spiritual impulse. Whatever, and I'm not getting into the truth of them, but just as the archetype, as a particular true nature expressing itself in a particular form, right? Can you imagine what the world would be like if not only that, if we all recognized how each one of us is a precious expression of the absolute, but each child. Right? So it's a lesson that is difficult because of our instinctual nature. And there's many, it's a very complicated, not complicated, but it's a detailed story. Right? So back to this stream that you were feeling, each teaching does have a particular stream. Yeah. And one of the streams of the diamond approach is valuing the individual human form.
Yeah.
And recognizing its spiritual nature. Not only that, the diamond approach says what basically makes us human is not our biology. There is a human essence that is divine. Right? We call it the water chandelier. Right? That our humanity is a spiritual quality. Which is one reason we experience a lot of humans. We go, right? And back to your original purity, right? Under the tree, many children, there's a place in us that does know this. It's in a lot of people who end up on spiritual paths. If you talk to them in detail, you can usually find a place where they don't just want to solve suffering, which is, of course, a huge motivation for going on a spiritual path. But one is like, I call it the children who see that the emperor has no clothes on. You're sitting there as a kid and you're looking and you're going, this doesn't make sense. Why do we say this doesn't make sense? Because something in our depth is recognizing that the surface conventional world is not lined up with something. Right? We go, this doesn't make sense. And the diamond approach is one way, it's a particular path that helps us make sense. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully said. I resonate 100%. That's, yeah, I share your view and your sense of this. Yeah.
Right? Now, the other thing about the diamond approach I think is worth my saying is not only does it really honor the spiritual uniqueness of the human consciousness and its capacity to mature and in a certain way be free to be well, we have a phrase for it, but anyway, the personalization of the absolute, right?
Yeah.
It's also recognizes that there isn't just one expression, that true nature is so unlimited that we have to be careful not to reify our view of what realization is. Right? That the total openness of true nature and its potential, unlimited potential, means that we have to be somewhat hold all realization, even when I'm talking about in terms of the essential human or the absolute pearl or however personalization of the, we have to hold it, we're invited to hold it lightly.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Because if we don't hold it lightly, we stop we put a barrier up against the dynamism and the unfoldment of reality, that force you were talking about. Mm-hmm.
It reminds me about a conversation I had with a friend the other day, and I was talking about the diamond approach, and I was sharing how about this stream and this connection, and she felt it, but she also challenged me, saying, "But would you be willing to let go of the diamond approach, or maybe at some point you will grow out of it, or something?" She's not in the school herself, so she just prompted that question. And I remember responding along the lines of, so if I were to let go of the diamond approach, it would mean letting go of true nature, because the diamond approach is an expression of reality in my sense of it. And also there is a seeing, which I also know has been communicated in the school, that the diamond approach essentially also has a conceptual dimension, that one can also go beyond the notion or idea of a teaching, and that's what I'm feeling we're touching upon here, that how any concept, any idea, anything can become fixed, and everything can be dissolved into the undefinable and the mystery, which transcends everything and all concepts.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just taking in that phrase, to let go of the diamond approach.
Yeah.
Treats it as a thing.
Yeah.
That'd be like saying to someone, letting go of one's practice. The diamond approach, or I mean, one of the things I appreciate about the diamond approach is that built in within its view is the view that views change and they unfold and evolve.
Yeah.
So now there is a stage for some people, especially God, this is how to say this in a useful way, but particularly when on one level your whole heart can be feeling that dynamism you were talking about and that unfoldment. That doesn't mean that your mind or the mind isn't forming concepts around the thing.
Yeah.
That even though the one is loving one's practice, one is loving the practice, the meditation practice, the orientating towards how to of the inquiry practice, and loving the sensing and being present practice. All our practices can be deeply moving in one's consciousness, and one can be forming a mental concept about it that also turns the diamond approach into this thing.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you got this relationship with this thing, or you have the relationship with Hamid, or your relationship with the teaching or the teacher, right? And that's just what the mind does.
Yeah.
So then there can be, and then one feels limited, of course. So that opens up a conversation, and in a certain way, whether it's Buddhism or the diamond approach or whatever, one is always invited into a fresh relationship.
Yeah.
With the moment, with the practice, with the teaching. That's part of the purity. That's part of the dynamism.
Yeah.
It's part of the maturation process. Anyway.
So this is the wisdom that I wanted to get to with what I was saying, because what I notice is that in the West, in particular, I think people fear commitment. They fear being limited by the teaching, for example. They fear being in relationship and somehow losing their individuality, or losing their sense of self, losing a sense of autonomy. And actually, that is what sparked my curiosity around this concept of rapprochement with the actual teaching itself.
Yes. God, this is such a beautiful question, challenging question.
Yeah.
Because at this level, we have to acknowledge, if one's going to really approach it, that the usual sense of self, that our open consciousness has been conditioned, and we develop a sense of self based in history.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the traditions call it ego, personality. It's not separate from our consciousness, but it's like the consciousness has been shaped into a particular form, and we put our birth certificate on it and our family history on it and everything that's happened on it. And it creates all kinds of contractions inside ourselves, but it becomes a very familiar sense of self. Like, this is who I am.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Now, that self is very ambivalent. On one level, it wants to be free.
Yeah.
Because the soul itself, the dynamism, wants to be free, but the very shape you're taking yourself to be is not letting the freedom flow, right? So a teaching comes your way, and I just thought of ayahuasca. Everybody's new favorite thing to get out of the shape is to take a psychedelic, right?
Yes, let's get into that.
Yes, and then they start feeling the dynamism and all that. I don't want to go off on that tangent yet, but so they hear a teaching, and part of their soul underneath the history might resonate with the teaching.
Yeah.
But the mental part of oneself, the historical part of oneself, goes, I've been so influenced by so much, and I want my freedom. I want to do what I want to do. I want to go where I want to go. I want to feel what I want to feel. I want to take the drug I want to take. I want to fuck who I want to fuck. Whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah.
And the thought of the teaching is coming into, and you're relating to the teaching as if it's society, as if it's the parent, or then goes, nope, I want my autonomy.
Yeah.
My sovereignty.
Exactly.
Right? Not recognizing, of course we want our sovereignty.
Yeah.
And our dignity and our freedom. But it's not the outer forms that are limiting you. It's the form you've already taken that's limiting the inner sovereignty to naturally arise. So one has to assess, is this teaching, are these methods going to help me unfold this form I'm stuck in, and you have to kind of hang out for a while to find out. Soul time is not on the clock. It's not on the clock, right? And it takes time, and it is challenging for people to make a commitment to a practice out of the sphere of losing their autonomy. That's the autonomy of the personality. It's the autonomy of the historical sense of self.
Yeah.
There is a true inner autonomy, no question.
Yeah.
And a practice worth its weight in gold is a practice that helps you orient. It's almost like I want to say, it's not a question of trusting the teachings, though that's, of course, a relevant question. But ultimately, can I trust my own unfoldment? And does this teaching or this particular method help me get closer to myself? Now, the reality is getting closer to oneself is not so easy initially because there are a lot of things to feel inside, a lot of vulnerabilities, a lot of sensitivities, which is why, of course, any practice. I saw that you did an interview with Vince, and he was talking about the kindness. It takes a lot of curiosity and playfulness, obvious between you and I, right? But it takes a lot of kindness and compassion. And it does take a certain kind of determination, like, I want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know how to solve the commitment question. I mean,
Yeah.
People, it's like, opening up really what is autonomy is a very interesting conversation, actually.
It is a very interesting conversation. And
It's almost, go ahead.
Yeah, and conversation I would like to have, because for me it also links with originality. And when I reflect and look at the world, throughout the summer I've been studying different characters by reading biographies. And one that comes to mind now is Frida Kahlo. You know her, the Mexican artist. When I read her biography, it was clear that she had this originality and authenticity about her beingness, which was fresh, which was new, which was also enchanting, because there was a particular kind of aliveness that came through her being simply by being herself. And with that, there is a very clear aspect of spontaneity as well, a responsiveness. That was my impression. Now, when we talk about autonomy,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd like to make a comment about Frida.
yeah,
Right?
please,
No, because I find her a very moving soul.
yeah,
There's so many of her paintings were, of course, the freedom of originality and how she shamelessly painted what she painted, expressed so much suffering.
yeah.
So, and I understood her suffering in a certain kind of way, just because of my own history and having been a nurse and many reasons. I really grokked her, and at those, and so in a certain way, it was like how to have that creativity, originality,
Yeah.
and she was, on a certain level, you could say she was attempting to digest, metabolize her suffering, her physical suffering, her psychological suffering, her spiritual suffering through her art.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a very legitimate, well, that is the truth of how she was expressing herself. Right. So in a certain way, is there a potential that supports the originality of the consciousness? Right. The freshness and the purity.
Yeah.
It can actually also metabolize the shell, like, the butterfly and the caterpillar, and actually dissolve the suffering layer so that the brightness of the creativity is even brighter.
For sure.
Right? And even freer is part of the invitation.
The word invitation. Yeah. It brought me to silence. Yeah. Yeah, what I'm curious about, we have other things I would love to explore, but I'm curious about the right here and now actually as well. And like what strikes me about you in this moment, or how I experience you, that I experience a sense of I experience a sense of expansion, like also a sense of intensity and energy. And I feel the fullness of you coming through, and also your passion about the teaching when you speak, and also the liquid clarity about the teaching that's coming through, that is just like, just streaming. That's my sense of it. And actually, when I took a walk before coming on to speak with you, and I was actually feeling it right then, because I tuned into myself, I tuned into you, I tuned into our field, and I was feeling exactly how you're manifesting right now. And in myself, I feel that, like, I feel everything you're saying, I'm resonating with as one, I would say. Like, everything you're sharing is as if the uh, the keys, or the genes, or the actual substance, and also the understanding that you're transmitting, is something that is just resonating as an innate kind of knowledge that is also very much the actual embodiment, or the actual substance of the teaching that's coming through. Also, obviously, in contact with your pearl and the personal wisdom that you embody as an individual soul being. Another thing that I notice in myself is, in some sense, also feeling a bit minimized. Like my own soul feels a bit minimized in relationship with you because of your bigness. In this moment, my soul feels more minimized. And without putting a value judgment on that, because I feel that is the natural order of things in the context of the podcast, that's what's manifesting in some sense. And I know when I speak about this, I've been on the other side of the equation, you could say, where I feel large, and then the other person is minimized. Not without, I mean, I'm using kind of delicate language here because it can be judged, but I'm not judging it. I'm just sharing it as it is, huh? And another thing that I want to bring in, that's another personal thing, is before coming on here, I had to work on my kind of idealizing transference onto you as a teacher, and which was fused with an idealizing transference of the mother as well. So I had to really work my own psyche, you could say, on those object relations before coming on. And I can feel like this, like the remnants of that, without being defined by it, you could say. So that's where I'm at. And I feel that me expressing this somehow allows me to just express my personal truth in being with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm touched by what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? I feel no judgment in the space at all within yourself or here, which is great. Yeah, no, it's just what's right. So what I'm noticing, and it maybe is connected to what you're saying, like before you started sharing about yourself personally. So I feel very open, very alive, very easy, very relaxed.
Yeah.
And I love talking about the work, and I love talking with you in this moment. And I'm a talker.
Mm.
I'm a manifester. I'm not a writer, but I'm a talker,
I
right?
think it's great.
I am. I mean, that's anyway. But and it's not the bronchitis, but I feel this kind of dense presence in the center of my chest.
Mm.
As you were speaking, especially that sense of, oh, you used the word minimized. Is that the word you used?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word I used.
And so, from a certain angle, and I just want to acknowledge that in a certain way, that's the raw material of the unfoldment. So there's something that a shape comes in that minimizes, and we could go into what is that shape? Like, what's the shape that starts showing up in relationship to something you experience as larger? And then you start talking about your mother. So your mother's probably inside that shape. Now, we're not going to open that whole thing up.
Yeah.
No, of course, but it is a way of saying that would be something that if we were doing an inquiry together, we'd be interested in that shape,
Yeah.
the association with the mother. I'd be interested in this shape that's inside my chest right now,
Yeah.
because that's what's arising in this moment,
Exactly.
right? And as Amin would say, it's better than watching TV.
Exactly. Real time, real talk. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Good. Good. Yeah.
I mean, probably one of the, I feel moved to say this right now, probably one of the most challenging things about opening up to reality uh, is not the stillness and the purity. And in a certain way, spiritual traditions have been cultivating our capacity to go into the stillness and the openness.
Hmm.
What's somewhat challenging is the dynamism, that true nature is dynamic, right? And in humans, that becomes quite challenging because of the instincts, and I don't want to go off into that. But the dynamism is challenging because it's an interesting way to say it, but it's almost like we temporarily have to put a lid on our dynamism, just enough comes through that we breathe and we eat, right? And we have to, in order to individuate, in order to come into a form, if the dynamism is just free before there's a solid base, the forms will just keep melting away in a new form and melting away in a new form and melting away. It's almost like the child needs a time, because that's the design, to stabilize. The positive part of the personality is it helps stabilize so that the individuated form can have the time.
Hmm.
Like some children don't like taking naps. Some children like taking naps, but when a small child is beginning to come into form, learning to walk and talk, to go down for the nap, or back to the absolute, is to get deformed. And they go, process, no, I got to stay up.
Hmm.
So anyway, it's so there's a certain kind of maturation needed to really begin to open up the dynamism in a certain way, to really, that one's consciousness and the dynamism of true nature, the dynamism of the absolute are kind of lined up. So it's not just a personality acting out no, there's certainly a stage for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, obviously. Um,
Yeah, that happens as well.
but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, journey, a long journey. Yeah, beautiful journey can be difficult one as well. Challenging one. So, what stimulated in my consciousness now is this, it's about relationship, actually, intimate relationship in particular. I am 29 years old, and in my immediate circles, relationship is something people think a lot about, right? Particularly in this age. And I've recently read A.H. Alma's Hamid's book, Pearl Beyond Price, again. And that book speaks a lot about relationship and how we project our essence onto our partner or our spouse, or as opposed to discovering it within ourselves. And I was wondering if you could share your experience and perspective on the meaning and the purpose of intimate relationship, and also the journey of maturation and development that can happen within the context of being in relationship with another human being in an intimate way.
big subject, of course. Um, what's because the subject is so relevant,
Yeah.
right? What's the most significant part of your curiosity around intimate relationship?
Yeah, I guess I on one level, it's the function. Like, what function does intimate relationship play in being human? Like, what role does that have in being a human being? So obviously, one can bring in biology, coming together to procreate creates new human beings, which is necessary for our for evolution and life and all of that stuff. And I'm also thinking about like regulation, how what I clearly see is that in relationship there can be a tendency for the partners to regulate each other, regulate each other's nervous system, be regulated through sex. And I know this is a topic that is so relevant and a very hot topic for people who are also spiritually inclined or inclined towards this type of work. So I guess something that can be useful for the listeners, for anyone who's interested in these things, in terms of what maybe okay, one way to start is or also look at it, is some of the misunderstanding about what relationship is. Maybe is that more concrete, perhaps?
No, actually, well, thank you for I just noticed the sun is coming into my space, so anyway, it doesn't matter. Thank you for saying more. It had helped me just kind of get the flow responsive, because there is so much to say. I moved to say that relationship, at the heart of the intimate relationship, is one form of the absolute, making love with itself, with another form. That creation happens in relationship, whether it's Frida with the paints and the canvas, whether it's her, is without the two, without the relationship, there would be no creation. So at the heart of relationship is creation.
Yeah.
That is how creation creates. Okay. It's how it makes forms. whether it's a caterpillar spun in its cocoon or the infant in the womb. There's the seed of the infant and there's a womb. There's two within the field of the mother. Right? So it is an intimate relationship in a certain way has the potential to really enter and express and live the ultimate creative mystery.
Yeah.
Okay. And a part of the form making involves an infant with a mother, right? It's two, it's a relationship, it's a very intimate relationship, very physical relationship under the best of circumstances. Now, deep intimate relationship is needed for the forms making, but at a certain point, the form that's being made also needs to, quote unquote, individuate out.
Yeah.
And then there's more form, right? And then there's just more and more form making, and form making has a combination of deep intimacy, mixing, holding, and separating and individuating out. An intimate relationship, as opposed to, let's say, a one-night stand, says, oh, our form making, our making a relationship, there's something very positive here. So we're going to individuate, do our thing, and we're going to come back together again. Right? So that's at the very kind of mystical level of the whole thing. Right?
Yeah.
The challenge is that in our form making with the mother, we create all kinds of images and ideas in our mind about humans, about relationship, about ourselves, so that when we start relating, in our 20s, 30s, 40s, we're mostly coming from our personality to our personalities. That's why there's, in America, there's a joke, you end up marrying your mother or your father. You get divorced, you marry your mother or your father again. You do more therapy. Whew, okay, I'm not marrying my mother or my father. I'm marrying my sister or my brother, right? It's almost a joke because of this transference phenomena.
Yeah.
My sense of a really maturing relationship, that even when a relationship goes really badly, and lots of relationships go badly,
Yeah.
and there's a separation, it is such an incredible opportunity to be with oneself and really explore all one's feelings, one's assumptions about relationships, one's projections. I mean, it's a learning vessel. And then, hopefully you learn something in your next relationship. You maybe are more mature in the relationship. You actually are not just looking at your partner like they're your mother who's going to feed you and take care of you. You actually begin to not just see them as a narcissistic supply, but you actually can begin to see them in their uniqueness.
Yeah.
And then you're negotiating that. It's a very there is no life without relationship, right? Now, one of the probably deepest lessons I ever learned, and also I used to work with couples many years ago.
Yeah.
Especially people who are in the spirit or on a spiritual path, there's a tendency to put pressure on the relationship to bring you closer to your true nature. Because one of the things that's true in like in a really good sexual relationship, when the soul is really, it's a positive sexual relationship, and your consciousness really does relax in the arms of your beloved, you really do have a really beautiful, let's say, whole body orgasm, or your orgasm or your being together is not just about tension release.
Yeah.
Right? it goes deeper into your whole soul, moving and relaxing, you're going to get closer to your nature, which then can kind of put pressure on the other to be that anchor to bring you closer to your nature.
Yeah.
Right? Which, of course, at some point they're going to disappoint one. They have to. Right? In order that one can even begin to feel like, oh my God, I'm putting so much pressure on my husband, wife, whatever, child, mother, whoever, to regulate me. And there's a time for that regulation through the other. Because it is a very positive, relaxing, holding, nourishing environment. I mean, the part of reality, it's true nature expressing itself.
Yeah.
At a certain point, either through death, illness, the other needs to go across country for work, whatever, there's going to be a disruption. It's designed to have a disruption so that one can enter into the sense of loss, enter into the feeling of the disruption, begin to recognize, oh, I've really been holding them as the source. And now I'm ready to enter my own space to see what's here if I'm not just being held, loved, and mirrored by the other. Right? A really, really good relationship, whether it's a friendship or an intimate sexual relationship, is recognizing, how do I want to say this, is recognizing is giving your friend the space to be alone with their aloneness. Be giving them the space to be intimate with themselves. It's really about self-intimacy, meaning intimacy with true nature, and one's beloved or friend is an expression of that, and there are moments to share that. Or there are moments where, the person's just driving you absolutely crazy. But you just you get into it, right? You just get into it, right?
And how do you
How exciting!
and how do you think about anger there? Because sometimes it can get feisty. So what would you say about anger in that context?
Thank God. Thank God. Not only that, so your partner narcissistically hurt you.
Huh?
Yeah, right. Well, not only that. Well, especially if there's a conversation between you and your friend,
Yeah.
and there's the space to really get angry, and then the inquiry can open up. God, I'm so angry, and I realize blah 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes you just gotta let the energy move, right? Right. And so then the relationship, all relationship is an opportunity to look at reality.
To explore, yeah.
Yeah. I make a joke. There's some people who are very, very, very nice in public and very, very, very assholey in private.
Yeah.
Right? Then there are other people who are very, very, very nice, who are very, very mature in private, and put them on the phone with the telephone company, and the person turns into a total jerk talking to the operator that they don't know. There's a place in ourselves that has these places that are really crunchy, that want to get moved and opened up. And some of us do it with strangers. Some of us do it with our intimate others.
Yeah.
Right? How to approach those crunchy moments and go and have a good laugh about it. And sometimes you have to really apologize and go, God, I was just really so tense. I could, eaten bones, and I just was so, right. And I don't have a therapy session, and, and I haven't given myself permission to just take the bat and just hit the couch because I'm just so, right. This is real. They're real. The creative force is very powerful at the absolute. Mm. And it's being squeezed into these little ego bodies. There's a lot of tension in there.
Yeah. A lot of pressure, a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah.
So inquiry helps open up and unfold it. Making love can help open up and unfold it. Relations,
Yeah.
Right? So is this helpful to you, what I'm saying about intimate relationship?
Yeah, it all makes sense to me. Yeah. It all makes sense to me. For sure. And then my next question is, which links up with this, is masturbation, right? Because then how do you see that? And also potentially, yeah, let's start with that. Masturbation. What's your take on that?
It's a very natural process.
Yeah.
Totally natural process, right? Children are naturally curious. I mean, they're not just curious about their toes. We have this image of kids playing with their toes. No, they're curious about their whole bodies, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, masturbation is a very natural process. Now, and there are many people who really are very free with themselves in a way they can't be with another person. And that's a very rich place of inquiry, right? And then there are other people who masturbation is an anxiety releaser, masturbating 10, 20, 30 times a day, which is not a problem as such, but it also is like one's energy doesn't actually, like, is that the only way the energy can come out? Is it being used? Actually, I'll say it this way. There's nothing wrong with masturbation. It's a totally natural process. But anything that is natural and essential and real can be used for psychological reasons.
Yeah.
Like some people, they manage their anxiety like this.
Yeah.
Right. Some people smoke. Some people use masturbation. So that at that point, is the masturbation like an anxiety releaser, or is it really about a self-pleasuring and really discovering one's own soulful, somatic love expression? Like what's one's attitude? Actually, it's always about that. What's one's attitude when making love or having sex, when one is masturbating? Is your super ego in the middle of the masturbation? Is like what's going on in your whole consciousness?
Yeah.
Right. So it can be a very rich place for exploration. There's no question about that.
An inquiry. And at the heart of what's being spoken here is this attitude of actually living in a way that is conscious and actually being interested in experience, interested in life, curious about human existence, and actually also like fundamentally being an explorer of reality. If you have that foundational sense of being an explorer of reality, there is no, sort of say, there is no judgment as such about what is should or should not be done. There is an openness, but with that attitude of actually exploring the nature of reality, then hopefully involving the heart so that one doesn't harm anyone, and has that sensitivity and compassion and all of that stuff. But fundamentally, I feel that, like, one thing that landed in me about the diamond approach is I realized that the diamond approach, for me, how I experience it, is a teaching for explorers of reality, foundationally speaking.
That's how we talked about it in the early days.
Yeah.
We never talked about it as a spiritual path.
Yeah.
It was a path of adventures in consciousness.
Adventures in consciousness, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think an interesting question, whether we're talking about intimacy, masturbation, whatever we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is who's being intimate? Who's masturbating?
Yeah.
Right? Is it a shy child that's masturbating, hiding it? Is it a cruel superego that's masturbating? Is it true nature, personal beingness that's masturbating? Or making, well, these are interesting questions. Who's speaking, right?
Yeah.
Who's speaking?
Yeah. There's definitely. Yeah, it goes to the heart of it.
Yes.
To the essence of it, yeah. What's it like for you now? What are you experiencing?
Right now, I just feel a quietude and a kind of sweetness, just hanging loose.
Yeah. Who is quiet?
Quiet is quiet.
Yeah. Quiet is quiet. Okay. Now, one thing I want to touch on, you spoke about it briefly. You spoke about ayahuasca. The trend nowadays is that people are exploring plant medicine. They're exploring with magic mushrooms. They're using ganja, weed, hashish, particularly the young generation. How do you see, what's your view on plant medicine? What's the use? What's the downside? How does it align with the diamond approach teaching? Do you have any recommendations? Could you just unpack that for me?
Masturbation to plant medicine. Very well.
Facets.
Huh? What did you say?
The facets of reality.
Yes, the facets of reality. Exactly. It's feeling in what wants to be spoken. Masturbation is a big subject. Plant medicine is an even bigger subject.
Yeah.
It's clear that plant medicines are part of true nature, are part of life on the planet Earth. And it's clear that for thousands of years, they have been used in very sacred ways in many traditions, many tribes, and that they've been a powerful agent of support for the evolution of humans to awaken.
Yeah.
Right. There's this, I'm not remembering his name right now, but I met him in the 70s. Anyway, he was one of the Americans who first really went deep into the jungles of South America. And he said you could always tell who the shaman was or the chief was in the village because their eyes were the most lit up and brightest. we were the least sleepy. So I have a deep respect for plant medicine, right? In the 70s, a little bit in the 80s, I was involved with doing peyote, Native American peyote circles, and with medicine people, and worked with a couple of different people from South America. And I would say in my own inner work, and I was just kind of meeting Hamid around this time, right? The context that I was using the plant medicine was very ceremonial and was very process oriented, in terms of actually doing inner work. Not so much the form where you put the blindfolds on, it wasn't like that. And you lie down, listen to music, and there's different ways that there are certain traditions. This would be like I would be doing a 4-hour Gestalt session with the person I was working with. So it was very cathartic and very deep and very moving, but really held in a particular kind of way, or in a kind of ceremonial way with the different medicine leaders I was sitting with, had the honor to sit with. Now, in the beginning, when I started working with Hamid, I'd come and tell him. I'd say, oh, I had this experience, blah, 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 blah. And he would inquire with me, right? Yeah. And over time, through the inquiry with him, I would recognize what I was, the subtle experiences I was having on the plant medicine, right? And that over time, I started recognizing, I started recognizing that I was turning to the plant medicine to get something moving that I wanted to avoid feeling. So there was a kind of deep inner coming to Jesus moment inside myself to really sort out, when was I using the medicine to facilitate an opening, getting to know something more fundamental? And when was I using it to change my state because I didn't like the state I was in? Can you make that right? That's a certain kind of come to Jesus moment, certain kind of self-honesty. So that was happening. And the other thing that was happening was that in working with Hamid, and these are the early days, so the diamond approach wasn't even called the diamond approach in the late 70s, right? Certain things started opening up in my sessions with Hamid that were more authentically digestible than was happening in the ceremonies. I mean, I have all kinds of wild experiences. I mean, really positive experiences, right? But over time, they just kind of fell away, is kind of how I would say it. They just kind of fell away. And, because I live in California, I've met all kinds of different shamans over the years, even in the last 20 years, right? And I can't even remember the last time I sat in a ceremony. It hasn't been recent, but it was probably within the last 10 years, maybe 10 years ago, right? And it was, I really liked this particular shaman. I had a great respect, and I was dealing with a health situation, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to just do a really deep cellular inner journey.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't since. So my own sense is that the plant medicine, there are a few things I want to say about it. One is, for some individuals, under the right circumstances, with the right support, they can be a great ally. There's no question about that. I don't want to minimize that. Particularly if there's a practice of inquiry and there's some psychological digestion, because I've seen enough of people who are involved in the ceremonies a lot, and I don't see much digestion. Like the shamanic path doesn't really have a digestive piece to it, and it's fundamentally a dualistic path. I mean, one of the things that I saw a number of years ago that I was very saddened by is I was privileged to go to this ceremony, and a woman was in very deep sorrow. I mean, it's the kind of sorrow that opens up the earth. I mean, it was so deep, so authentic, and she was sobbing from the soul of the earth, kind of crying. Yeah, no, it was. And I remember just sitting, and I didn't know her, but I was sitting behind her, just kind of just sitting in the heart of compassion. I thought that's the best thing I could do here, just hold this space, right? And the shaman came over and started working with her as if she was having a demonic experience. My heart broke. She was not having a demonic experience. She absolutely was not having it. And her crying became more superficial, more hysterical as she's trying to pull this. And so there's that side of it.
Yeah, lack of attunement.
Well, but it's also a certain kind of dualistic view. Not all shamanic paths have that, but some do have this, right? And then, of course, in the Diamond Approach, we don't. That's so not our. If there's a kind of demonic feeling inside yourself, take a look at your own hatred or your own. Take a look.
Yeah.
Right. So there are some people that individually can be very useful for, and it can be a distraction.
Yeah.
And it is a powerful logos in itself that you can get pulled into, because one of the powers of the plant and one of the calls of it is it really activates the dynamism of being.
Yeah.
It really activates the movement. Right. So it really depends on the orientation.
Yeah.
So the Diamond Approach, we don't use plant medicine. We're basically open about it, meaning we don't support and we don't negate. It's like, what is your truth about what's calling you, right? What is your experience? And there have been occasionally a couple of students over the years who, based on their vulnerability and their sensitivity and their already very deep opening, I have a couple of times said, I really don't want you to.
Yeah.
I'm usually neutral about it, like, what is your guidance about it, and blah, and just inquiring into what's moving the movement.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of times that I've said no. Like, I've had a strong, I don't advise this for you at this moment in time.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But I think the important thing is just like, who wants to do it? Why? What's the context?
Which again brings in the guidance. I mean,
yes.
Like with the students, it was clear that in certain times you've served as their guidance, meaning you've given them pointers in terms of recommendations. But ideally, there is an internal inquiry process where one can find the truth of the calling. Where is this coming from, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm totally aware that there are many, 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 many students in the Diamond Approach that are using plant medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not naive. And, and hopefully the ones that are finding great benefit from it, or great wisdom and recognizing it's not useful to them.
Yeah, this is it.
And kind of a discernment. It does invite
sincerity. Yeah, is very key. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share this one other experience I had I was trying to remember when. Anyway, late 70s, early 80s. And I took a certain substance and I had a particular experience that was very, very powerful. I'll just say that. I don't want to go into the details of it. And the next day, I didn't feel well. And I recognized that in a certain way, I hadn't exactly earned the experience. It wasn't really mine. I really got that the substance itself catapulted. And now, my assemblage point, my soul definitely went with it. I was very present with what was happening. It was a very illuminated experience.
Yeah.
I felt very honored. Yeah, I was, personal Jessica was gone. So my soul felt I grokked what was happening.
Yeah.
I was very moved. Right. The next day, when ordinary Jessica is definitely back, reflecting on it, humbled, but also recognized it wasn't really my realization.
Good.
That, a doorway was opened.
Yeah.
I was privileged to take the seat of a certain view of reality.
Yeah.
And something in me said, okay, Jessica, now let's see.
Yeah.
I could just tell it wasn't really my realization.
Again,
right?
for me, what this points to is a sincerity and an honesty of heart and of being. And I think I just want to emphasize that because I feel this is such a key aspect of the path, that level of sincerity and genuineness. And also what I've come to realize and actually through watching a documentary about the Vietnam War is our human beings' ability to deceive themselves and deceive others
Right.
as a defense mechanism against the truth that is being feared on some level. I'm not going to go into the full shebang of that, but after having seen that, it just deepened in me, the understanding and the valuing and the importance of sincerity, and also how sincerity, in some sense, is a very advanced, like integrating sincerity requires a very deep level of maturity in some sense, because you need to really if you have deep sincerity, you will confront a lot of things that threatens the ego, that threatens the self, that can lead into what one perceives to be dangerous, that can lead into the unknown. Basically, sincerity propels one into the unknown, because the desire for truth is deeper than the fear of truth in some sense.
Yes, beautifully said. Right. It was so interesting when you said the word Vietnam. Of course, I was in my 20s during Vietnam, and I worked with Vietnam vets when I worked in nursing. Yeah, no, I used to work a lot in
therapy field.
I've worked in some very interesting places as a nurse, and one was with vets. And one of the positive uses of psychedelics actually is some of the work that's being done, John Hopkins, etc., working with vets, working with people with a certain level of trauma that has such a tight fear contraction in the soul, that there's certain substances used extremely mindfully that can really help relax something. So that's a whole other level of it's being done with that, and with people dying, and that kind of research I feel very supportive of.
Yeah, and I think that's good to mention, and with that also mentioning how Diamond Approach teachers, it's a policy, a part of the school of referring students to therapy if that is what is needed. This is not a therapeutic environment primarily, right? Although therapy does happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a certain kind of work. I mean, first of all, I mean, I'd already been in a lot of therapy before I even met Hamid. And then I met Hamid as a therapist, right? As a Reichian person.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of kind of digestion of lots of layers of my history before I even entered deeply. I mean, because the work was kind of evolving in the early years with what's known as the senior teachers, like myself, and anyway, all the various people of the original generation. The work was unfolding and being discovered, and it was going into deep question of who and what are you, which is a very different level of questioning when dealing with trauma or dealing with complex psychological histories that really need a certain kind of unwinding.
Mm-hmm.
And need a certain kind of therapeutic support. And some people can really do both at the same time. Lots of people can do both at the same time, the Diamond Approach and the therapy practice, because they're really different. Yeah. And some people really need to do the therapy first before approaching the Diamond Approach.
Yeah.
Right.
From there, let's segue into the question around what is a good student? How would you describe a good or sincere or a genuine student? What is it characterizes like a good student in your experience and perception?
Mm-hmm. I get to just feel through all the souls I've been privileged to
Yeah,
hang with, right?
exactly.
Well, a good student is someone who has a kind of burning curiosity with just enough courage to really enter into a conversation with themselves about who and what they are, and just really enough curiosity, enough courage to just take a look at what's going on, right? To begin to slowly feel what's going on, to slow down, to sense what's going on, right? Sometimes it takes a while for the kindness to come because of that inner critic.
Yeah.
And it's people are often more courageous sooner before they're kind to themselves, and that's one of the functions of a teacher, is to hold the kindness, have a certain kind of capacity to really I know what I want to say. One of the best things, because I was also trained as a therapist many years ago, but this training teacher said to me was, the art of becoming a therapist is a willingness to learn your client's language, to really take in the story, how they hold themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And to help them unpack it.
Yeah.
Right. And then if I add the Diamond Approach layer, it's like, okay, to unpack it, and then slowly with a certain kind of discriminating questions, help them recognize that as they unpack it, that within the jewels of their history, their essential nature is there.
Yeah.
It's been, the soul has shaped it in a particular way, like the anger, and inside it is the strength, right? And that's, part of being a teacher is not just being present, but really taking in the meaning of a person's storyline, that their soul is really has something to say and its own way to unpack itself and to really take the wisdom of the diamond approach, because we have a particular view on almost on on the nature of the ego. And anyway, but to actually ask the discriminating question, to be able to shift it from the historical layer, get enough of the historical layer expressed, and then shift it to the essential layer.
Yeah.
Takes a certain kind of art of question.
Yeah. So to the people who perhaps struggle with having that, like that balance of curiosity and courage, what would you say to them?
Well, what's here in this moment is to recognize that the place that's reluctant or shy has a reason for its reluctance. So let's listen to that. What's your reluctance? Let's hear that. Let's hear that part of the story, or that part of your experience. And by story, I don't mean a two-dimensional thing. I really mean how your life is organized inside of you. So let's honor the reluctance, and at the same time acknowledging something in you is not reluctant, or you wouldn't be sitting here with me. And let's have them both in the space, but let's listen to the voice of the reluctant one.
Yeah.
And usually that opens up some very important pieces of information, right? That I really think an error is made, that when reluctance or quote unquote resistance is seen as the enemy, it's not. It's serving a purpose, but we need to open it up and understand what the purpose is and clarify it and shine the light on it. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really poignant. Yeah. Yeah. And I also know that a lot of people listening, a lot of them, some of them aspires towards eventually doing the down approach teaching and are curious about that. Some teachers actually listens to this podcast. A lot of people are working with teachers, and there are some people who's not working with a teacher. What for you, you talked about it already a little bit, but maybe we can even make it more explicit. What do you feel? You've also trained teachers, from what I understand. What is it? What's a hallmark of a good teacher, yeah?
Yeah.
Nothing, huh?
Well, of course. Now we're getting into well, a hallmark of a good teacher is someone who's willing to constantly become a teacher, that the becoming never stops. Never, never, never stops. So I would say a hallmark of a good teacher is someone who's really willing to do their own inner work, particularly dealing with their own personality, their own identity, their own narcissism.
Yeah.
Right. To recognize their what's motivating them. Right. Whether the motivation is, I want to save my mother. That motivates a lot of people who become therapists. Whether what's motivating me is because I want to stand in front of 100 people and be the teacher, a certain kind of narcissism, grandiosity. So to actually just be willing to just work on one's stuff, because the reality is we all have stuff. It's just the nature of reality. It's the one's relationship to one's stuff. Yeah. Same with a teacher. In some way you could say a good teacher is someone who's also a good student.
Yeah.
Actually, it would be really.
I want to share something on that, because I asked Shanti the same question. I asked if you had some advice for teachers or mentors or coaches, and he said, "Be your own best student."
Yes, I agree 100%. It reminds me of a funny story. A few years back, this is just a funny story. I hadn't felt a narcissistic hurt in quite a while.
Yeah.
Right. And I was just feeling, I mean, like really quite a while. And something happened at a retreat with Hamid. And I felt such a narcissistic hurt from him to me. Right. And I was like shocked. I went, oh my God, I really feel narcissistically hurt. Right. And then after feeling the hurt, I had to laugh.
Yeah.
But of course, it would have to come to the moment where I felt narcissistically hurt by my teacher.
Yeah.
Right? To even work on that place in me, besides having a clarifying conversation with him at some point, but that place in me that felt narcissistically hurt.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, to be a really good student.
And I think you're pointing on something very specific or very poignant and important here about narcissistic hurt, and that is something one can detect that has its own quality and discernible and something to particularly give attention to. Huh?
Oh, I mean, one of the things I like to say to people who are in the ever ongoing process of becoming a teacher, it never stops. Yeah. Just like being a student never stops.
Beautiful.
Right? Never stops. Never. Yeah. Right? The dynamism never stops.
No.
Is that there's a certain sacrifice that needs to be made if one really wants to become a teacher of true service, which is willing to have your narcissistic layers surface, be felt, and the exquisite vulnerability, because there's certain narcissistic sensitivities that someone who doesn't become a teacher never really has to deal with.
Yeah, interesting.
There's a whole other level of sensitivities that get stimulated working on teams, doing your first talks, seeing your first students, feeling like you're not Hamid, you're not Jessica, you're not Morton, you're not whatever teacher you're liking, and to feel and to be able to stay present while feeling the presence and one's own historical content. We could say it limitation, but to really still feel and recognize I have a lot of where my soul really lands in taking myself to be a certain history.
Yeah.
Now, a teacher does not have to have all that digested. I mean, but a teacher has to have a certain kind of orientation to one's own content.
Yeah.
And a certain kind of presence and capacity to be with that content and digest that content in the best of your capacity, not act out that content. There's a certain kind of humility. There's a certain kind of humility that's a natural movement towards moving to a certain level of selflessness and
truth.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Good. Very good. And this is a more specific question. Let me just tune in if I'm going to ask this or not. No, actually, I'm not going to ask that question. Now, I had an interesting conversation with a friend yesterday. I asked him, how do you feel that I come, or when we are in conversation, do you feel me primarily as an autonomous soul, or do you feel me as a student of the diamond approach? Because I tend to, with my friends, speak a lot about the teaching. And
Mhm.
that is founded in the fact that my deepest interest is truth, spirituality, and reality. And the lens through which I explore that is the Diamond Approach teaching. So pre-Diamond Approach teaching, I got this level of intimate with it, I spoke about spirituality as well, but less about the Diamond Approach because Diamond Approach was a smaller portion of my soul. But over time, it's grown more and more and more. And what he replied was, over phone, where I want to distinguish between you on the phone and you in person. And on the phone, my sense is that you can come across as, or at times come across that the diamond approach is in the foreground. And there are sometimes I would have preferred for it to be in the background. And while when I speak on you or meet you in person, generally it is in the back, or it's not, it doesn't fill the space in the same way. So we had a very
nice friend.
Yeah, beautiful. So we had this open conversation about that, and he also had the process around giving constructive critique, because that's the thing in society as well. So it was a very beautiful exchange.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? I mean, you've been on the path many years now. So how do you what is your attitude and approach in talking or being yourself and sharing about what you love with relatives, with friends? Do you at all talk about the diamond approach? Do you just not focus? How do you live that?
Well, it's been an unfoldment.
Yeah, of course.
I mostly don't.
You mostly don't talk about it now.
I have with my friends who are in the work, of course, we talk about the work or what we're experiencing, what our own unfoldment is. We support each other and all that. But I learned a long time ago. It's just I mostly don't.
Yeah.
I do if someone's interested.
Yeah.
And there are few times where I'll be at a social gathering and a conversation will open up and someone actually is interested.
Yeah.
Right. That's a different octave of conversation, but mostly I don't.
Yeah.
I do it just very superficially. Now with your friend, who obviously you have a very engaged, straightforward conversation with, I might with a friend like that.
Yeah.
But also, but encourage that friend when you're missing me, knock on my door and pull me forward, right?
Yeah.
Now I have a couple of friends like that who are not in the work, who I cherish, and we get into very interesting conversations.
Yeah.
But most people I find are not interested, whether it's the diamond approach
or spirituality in general.
Yeah, just not that interested.
Yeah, totally.
And that's been true for decades. It's not something new with this generation. That's just
yeah.
I mean, most of the wisdom, of the psychological wisdom that has opened up in the last 70 years, Freud, Jung, all that, Wilhelm Reich, well, hardly any of it is digested into the culture.
Yeah.
A little bit Buddhism, is a little bit more digested into the culture. And I think the Dalai Lama is such a public figure. But in a certain way, part of the maturation process is a deepening alone with the alone, with true nature, and recognizing how reality is really manifesting, including a lot of reality is manifested in forms that are not that interested in reality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
Yeah. So I think with the same conscious awareness and sincerity, one can gauge and feel when it's appropriate to talk about it or not. And obviously, there is such a great variety of friends and relatives where it's applicable, so many different situations. And again, it comes back to guidance as well, right? Which eventually is just integrated and internalized. It becomes just a natural sensitivity to the situation, the moment, and unfolding.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm recognizing, I'm having a sweet memory in this moment. I had this insight. I went to a wine tasting, maybe like, it had been in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And it was a very California wine tasting. So literally at the table, there was a guy who owned a winery. There was a guy who had a PhD, you could get a PhD in winery. So they were really
dedicated, huh?
And the wine would come by, right? And the discriminating awareness.
Incredible.
Was incredible. And I realized they were doing with the wine what we do with the soul.
Yeah, definitely.
Like in a certain way, a really good diamond approach student, a diamond approach teacher is a wine taster of the soul.
Yeah.
Has it been in the wood barrel 5 years, or has it been like 7 years? And what did the 7 years do to be the? And I just got it, and I just got, oh my God. So there was these soul capacities, and what they were interested in tasting and smelling and becoming one with was wine.
Yeah. Exquisite.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm not so interested. I like a really good wine.
Yeah.
Not like that.
Not like that. Yeah.
I'm much more interested in what's the shape of, I'm much more interested in consciousness
and tactility,
how the body and consciousness and the soul are one. And there's so many things I'm really interested in, but
it speaks to something important there, the honoring of the different destinies and soul paths and journeys that true nature make through a human being as vessels, right? And the kind of tolerance and valuing of that diversity. One thing I want to touch on is
I notice I'm getting a little restless.
You want to it's
well, no, also I've been sitting a long time, longer than usual.
I know.
Okay, one more, and then we're going to have to.
Okay, we're going to wrap it. So in the last page of the Pearl Beyond Price, Hamid talks about the diamond pearl.
Yes, what about it?
Yes. What is that?
I think in this context, remember when I spoke in the beginning about the absolute unfolding itself and revealing something about the value of the personal consciousness?
Yeah.
You could say the diamond pearl, the kind of flowering of that.
Yeah.
The individual, the individual consciousness inseparable from its boundless nature.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And that when it's manifesting, the different qualities of essence is what's manifesting, what's speaking, what's living.
Yeah.
Right. So the mind becomes the mind of true nature, or the guidance becomes the guide, or the heart becomes the heart of the water chandelier, that the actual qualities become the organs.
Yeah.
Right. Basically.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, I can feel the facetedness of that in my heart when you speak.
Yes.
So Jessica and all the listeners, thank you. And that was such a wealth of wisdom, wealth of love, wealth of knowledge that has come through in this particular conversation, and a unique gem. Thank you to everyone who listened, and stay tuned. Something new will unfold for sure, right? Yeah.